I'm very worried about this as well. I worry that Black Lives Matter, if it got all the attention that it wants, it could set race relations back in this country a generation. I mean, because obviously I'm not aware of everything that is said under the banner of Black Lives Matter, and there could be some highly rational, really impeccable people advocating under the in the stream of this movement. But from what I've seen, it strikes me, much of it, and I've seen it filtered to me through the left-wing media that is largely, if not entirely, sympathetic to the movement. Most of what I have seen said, in particular about these videos and the cases of which we don't have videos, but which have been well described, like the Michael Brown shooting, most has struck me as dangerously and offensively irrational. And so, I mean, here's the core issue for me. These cases run the full gamut of police malfeasance and culpability on the one end to completely predictable and even rational uses of force on the other, and everything in between. So on the one end, you have cops who are quite obviously guilty of murder, whether it's from racism or some other deranged motive. And I would put Walter Scott and Laquan McDonald, those shootings there. These cops, to my eye, clearly should never have been given a gun and a badge, and they belong in prison. And if I'm not mistaken, the cops involved in those shootings are actually being prosecuted for murder. So the system appears to be working in the right direction on those cases. But on the other end, you have legitimate uses of force that would have happened 99 times out of 100 in the presence of any sane cop, and race surely had nothing to do with it. And I would put the Michael Brown case pretty close to that far tail on the continuum. And we don't have a video of that, but the facts as reported suggest that he attacked a police officer and was trying to get his gun. Now, if you're trying to get a cop's gun, it is only rational for him to believe that you intend to kill him with it. And whatever the color of your skin, you're going to get shot. And if you don't get shot, it's because you got very lucky, either because the cop had amazing hand-to-hand skills and he just decided to spare your life, or because there were enough cops on hand to physically overpower you without requiring lethal force. In the rest of these cases, you have almost every variety of incompetence and bad luck and poor training and just basic human chaos. And I would put, all these recent ones, like, the Philandro Castile and Alton Sterling. And frankly, I'd even put the Eric Garner case somewhere in the middle here. And these cases, the three I just mentioned, they're totally unlike the extremes, but they're importantly different from one another too. Because, I mean, one important thing to point out is that in some of these videos, the video record itself can be profoundly misleading because some start after the shooting occurred. You simply don't know what precipitated it. And some that show the shooting don't show you what the cops themselves saw. And so you can't really judge whether it was rational for them to feel that their lives were in danger. So the range of these cases, ethically and as a matter of police procedure, is almost as wide as can be imagined. And then you throw Trayvon Martin in there, where the guy who shot him wasn't even a cop, and it arguably wasn't even white, right? And yet all these cases are spoken about in the same breath as intolerable examples of murderous racism on the part of the police. So my problem, and again, this doesn't subsume everything Black Lives Matter is doing, but my problem this is the moral core of the movement, as far as I can tell. And these claims are not only inaccurate and unfair, they seem, frankly, dangerous to me. One thing I see in these police videos in general, and and I've seen a lot of these videos, and it's, for black arrests, white arrests, and I've trained with police officers, so I kind of see this from the other side. And the overwhelming fact that comes through in these encounters is that people don't understand how to behave around cops so as to keep themselves safe. You mentioned resisting arrest. I mean, people have to stop resisting arrest, and they have to understand how the force continuum looks from a cop's eye view. And so this is it's a bit of a public service announcement, but I feel like if you take nothing else from this end of the podcast, this is something you can take which will actually keep you safer. And I think this is something that Black Lives Matter should be teaching explicitly. When you put your hands on a cop, when you're wrestling a cop or grabbing him or pushing him or striking him, you are very likely to get shot, whatever the color of your skin, because when you're with a cop, there's a gun out in the open, right? And any physical struggle has to be perceived by him as a fight for the gun. And again, a cop doesn't know what you're going to do if you physically overpower him, and he has to assume the worst. And most cops are not so confident in their ability to physically control a person without shooting him, and for good reason, because they're actually not so well trained at that. And they're continually confronting people who are bigger than them or younger and more athletic or more aggressive, and they do not have they're not superheroes. These are people, just ordinary people with surprisingly little training. And once things turn physical, they can't afford. I mean, so, and this is again something that people are totally confused about. They think that if they see a video of somebody, trying to punch a cop in the face, and the person's unarmed, well, then the cop should just be punching back, right? And any use of deadly force is unwarranted. But that is just insanity. It's not the cop's job to be the best bare knuckle boxer on earth, right? He can't afford to get hit in the head and risk getting knocked out, because there's a gun on the table. And this is the cop's perception of the world, and it is a justifiable one given the dynamics of human violence. And this is a part in your podcast with Rajiv Sethi where I felt like you guys were talking past one another a little bit on this point. And I recommend people see that podcast because it was very valuable on many points. But on this point, so he was totally correct to insist that you should be able to be rude to a cop in our society without being physically punished for it, right? Much less killed. And I think he's totally right to think that it's a measure of a civilized society that cops don't start beating you just because you've been disrespectful.
Sure.
But you were right to insist that people shouldn't be rude to cops because it's totally unwise. And in defense of what you were saying, you're totally right. You want to be respectful to a cop because you don't want things to escalate. And again, Rajiv is right in saying that they shouldn't escalate based on anything you might say. And if they do escalate, it's the fault of the cop. And on Rajiv's side, he's right to think that the cop's job is to have a very thick skin and be totally professional in his dealings with the public. But on your side, I mean, do you really want to increase the risk to your own life by testing the emotional maturity of the guy with the gun? No, you don't want to do that. And in my view, you have to deal with a cop like he's a lethal robot who could malfunction at any time. And what I see in these videos is people who just have no idea what the implications of grabbing a cop, pushing a cop, doing whatever they're doing to resist arrest. And just think about this. It's never up to